Welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program adventure. My first adventure in this game, in fact, for the year 2025. A special year, actually, because my very first ever KSP video was in 2015, which, can you believe, was 10 years ago now? Man, how time flies, eh? Don't worry, there will be a 10-year anniversary video when we hit the exact date of that first upload. Anyway, look at me already getting sidetracked, and the video hasn't even begun, so let's try the intro one more time. Welcome back to today's Kerbal Space Program video, in which I'm going to do a revamp of one of my all-time favourite videos that I've done. Send a space station-sized vessel with crew into the skies of Jool, Kerbal Space Program's only gas giant and biggest planet in the game. I did this about 4 years ago in stock KSP, and like I say, it's one of my most popular videos, standing at about 1.5 million views last time I checked. The reason I want to revisit this mission is because A, like I said, I have very fond memories of really enjoying doing it, and B, the game has changed a lot in the past 4 years, or rather, mods have changed the game a lot in the past 4 years. One of the biggest game changers to come out was BlackRack's Volumetric Clouds mod, which adds incredible weather effects and clouds, along with enhancements to Scatterer, to Kerbin, Eve, Lathe, and Jool. Like its real-life counterpart, Jupiter, Jool is now a terrifying location to visit, with swirling storm clouds and lightning, and I really just wanted to see that for myself. If you join BlackRack's Patreon, which I've linked in the description, then you'll get access to the latest update of Volumetric Clouds, which dropped just before Christmas, and has a few cool upgrades, focusing on major lighting and shading improvements, including a new lighting model that makes for more realistic clouds, ambient lighting, and long-distance cloud shadows. It also now has physically accurate God rays, which account for the 3D structure of clouds and simulate single scattering in shadowed areas. The update has also introduced native cube map support, which improves performance, especially for mods, while temporal upscaling and various bugs like scattering artifacts and cloud fog transitions have been fixed. There's a very brief summary of all the changes. So this was as good a time as any to visit somewhere in the Kerbin system that really shows off BlackRack's work. To address the elephant in the room, yes, it's Patreon exclusive, but just because Patreon is a subscription platform, you can literally just pay once, get the download, and then unsubscribe, and you'll still have the mod files. They won't self-destruct. You just won't get any additional updates unless you rejoin the Patreon, which, again, you can just do whenever an update is released, and then do the same thing and unsubscribe immediately. So it's not a subscription-based mod, you just have to pay to get it. And if you want to keep paying to support BlackRack, you can. I'm still subscribed to him, but that's your decision to make. And hey, I've got a Patreon as well. You could support what I do by clicking the link in the description. I'll put that. Well, my Patreon's always linked in my descriptions because, it's mine, right? Anyway, where are we in the build? As you can see, we have constructed the vessel that will dive through the atmosphere of Jool. Then at the front, I'm adding this little science probe. So like the first time I did this mission, we have the big space station that flies the crew through, but then that has to then, survive. So we can't go too deep in the atmosphere because we'll never be able to get it back out again. It's shaped like this, by the way. We have those big, heavy fuel tanks at the front where there's a massive heat shield, so this thing sort of stays balanced. If we have all the weight at the back, there's a greater chance it will flip out, and then that'll be a complete disaster. So we have lots of weight at the front with the fuel tanks, and then that's where the heat shield is. But at the very front of that is a small probe with a communications antenna that will just be dropped into Jool's atmosphere, never to return, so we ourselves can see what the interior of the planet is like with BlackRack's volumetric cloud. So that's kind of the mission there. This is actually one of the missions I used to do quite a lot when I was not a YouTuber, and I was just playing Kerbal Space Program for my first time, I guess. So when I was just doing missions for fun, I'd often just like building little, what I called science bombs into Jool, and then having it transmit science back to the KSC so I could unlock stuff. Because this was where before I could really pull off an interplanetary return. So I was just doing one-way trips to the surfaces of Juno and Eve with little probes that would broadcast stuff back, and I did the same for Jool, and I thought that was pretty fun, so I can kind of relive my youth with this mission here. And that's my story. As you can see, the rest of the rocket is just kind of a big dumb booster. I'm now going to crossfade back because I forgot to add science units to the space station that flies through the through Jool, so that was good, wasn't it? And like the first time I did this, I'm going to stick the science units on the end of these pistons. So basically, once we're going through the atmosphere, they can temporarily stick out and be exposed to the air of Jool, not just on the lee side of that heat shield there, but actually exposed to the atmosphere of Jool. So just because, like, it doesn't do anything in the game, but, like, it just is nicer from the whole pretending we're on a big mission type thing. I don't know. Anyway, here we are in the tracking station, time warping to a Jool transfer window, which, if you're not aware, Jool needs to be 101 degrees ahead of Kerbin. So I used the little lens flare of the sun to kind of form my angle. So I eyeballed it. I've put this graphic on screen and I realized I was probably closer to 90 degrees rather than 101 degrees. But honestly, Jool's gravity well is so massive that it doesn't really matter that much. It's very easy to capture around Jool because its gravity well is huge. And here we are on the launch pad. Doesn't the atmosphere look absolutely amazing? And doesn't that rocket look so impressive, eh? Almost as impressive as how Opera Browser has completely changed how I browse and stay productive every day. The new generation of Opera is here, Opera One R2, and it's changing the way you browse. The sidebar player lets you take control of your music and videos, pause, skip, or adjust playlists from Spotify, YouTube Music, or other platforms, all without leaving your tab. And with the pop-out feature, you can keep your player wherever you need it. Want a browser that matches your style? Opera's dynamic themes lets you customize everything: colors, animations, sounds, and more. With options like Aurora and Midsummer, your browser has never looked this good. Multitasking is easy with split screen. Open 2 tabs side by side. Whether you're comparing files, streaming while chatting, or checking references, it's all in one window. And with the ARIA command line, you can search or ask questions instantly without disrupting your workflow. And for creative projects, ARIA's AI image generation creates visuals from your prompts, while image recognition answers questions about any image you upload. Opera One R2 isn't just an upgrade, it's an entirely new experience. Download for free now and see for yourself. And off we go, thundering off the pad in our rocket. And yeah, the Kerbals are not going to return here for another 12 years. You know, Jool is very, very far away from Kerbin, and this mission there were, let's just say there were a couple of complications that elongated the amount of time we were spending in space. And so yeah, 12 years from now, our Kerbals shall return. Now, I might just want to draw your attention to one thing that you might be a bit confused about with the rocket, and that is the crew capsule at the top. Why is it there? Because it's absolutely not needed. But I kind of wanted there to be some sort of believable launch escape system for the Kerbals. The actual command pod they'll be sitting in for the mission is obviously the big space station / space submarine type vessel, but that's all encased in that fairing. And if something goes wrong with this rocket, because look at it, it's very big and unwieldy, it would be nice if they could abort and be pulled to safety. And so that's why there's that capsule at the top, and it's sticking out of the payload fairing. Once we have established a stable low Kerbin orbit, the Kerbals can then EVA out of the command pod and then board the Jool vessel and, remain on there for the remainder of the trip. But here we are, so we've now expended both the side solid rocket boosters and core that formed the first stage. Now we're burning our upper stage, which is formed of 3 Rhino engines. Has to be the Rhino engine because, it has to be 3 Rhino engines, I should say, because this is a very hefty payload. Once orbital insertion is achieved, and it's all going to be done with this Rhino engine stage, there's a few things that we need to do. I've just sort of mentioned the fact that we have to transfer the 3 Kerbals from the kind of abort pod to the main spacecraft, jettison the fairings, I guess, which has now been done. And we obviously need to reorient the spacecraft as well, because right now the Jool spacecraft is, I'm doing the air quotes thing, upside down. Most of the mass of that craft is at the front, those big fuel tanks, which it wouldn't have been great to have those at the top of the rocket stack. It would have made the whole thing much more unstable during flight. So I kind of have the whole thing spun around and back to front, so to speak. So that's why the Rhino stage needs to stay attached for the entirety of the ascent, because the next stage, the Jool spacecraft, the engine is pointing the wrong way, and it also is pointing straight towards the cruise pod. So that's kind of why we had to complete orbital insertion with the Rhino stage. But the Rhino stage is not going to get stuck remaining, floating around in low Kerbin orbit forever. It's equipped with a probe core and some batteries that once we've kind of got the Kerbals all on board the Jool spacecraft, we can then have that Rhino stage just safely deorbit itself. I thought about having parachutes on it and, making it land and recovering it, but, you've probably seen how long this video is. I kind of wanted to trim out as much fat as possible. So with our Kerbals disembarked, we can actually get rid of the little launch escape pod now. It's got a probe core just underneath the launch escape tower. Speaking of the launch escape tower, I thought it might be fun to just fire it, do a little backflip. This gets a visual flair and all that. If that's not worthy of a little like on the video, then frankly, I don't know what is. And then the next thing we need to do is, of course, do the thing with the Rhino stage. It turns very, very slowly because it's got a teeny tiny reaction wheel on board, and it's a hefty old thing. But there we are. We have completed our deorbit burn. Now we can switch back to the... We need to think of a name for this. What should we call it? Is it a submarine? Not really, because it's not going underneath water. but it's the Jool Diver. Why do we call it that? Because that's the name of the actual craft file that you can probably see in the on the map screen, and when we were building it in the vehicle assembly building. Now, speaking of when we were building it in the vehicle assembly building, I did not notice this until far too late in the mission for me to go back and redesign things. Basically, my big epic plan, and the reason why we only have 3 Kerbals with us, is because at the front of the Jool Diver, but just before the fuel tanks, is an Apollo-style command pod, and that's got a parachute attached to it, and my plan was that will then detach from the fuel tanks and detach from the kind of rest of the craft behind it, and it would have a heat shield, and it would re-enter Kerbin and land Apollo-style. And I added the parachute, and then I guess I just built the fuel tank. I can't even remember the order in which I constructed things now. Maybe I built the fuel tank assembly, and then I just forgot to add a heat shield and a decoupler to the back of that command pod. So, although we have a parachute, that's it. We don't have any other means of landing back on Kerbin. Now, don't worry. The Kerbals do survive. After the 12-year and 37-day mission, I believe it was, they do indeed make it in one piece, but only just barely. Let me just say there was a lot of... Well, it was very tense. It was a very tense return to Kerbin, let me just say, but all of that is to come. As you can see, we are well on our way to Jool. I decided to split the burn in 2 just to kind of maximize the use of the O-berth effect. Basically, it's more efficient to burn at as close to Kerbin periapsis as possible for this escape burn. So by splitting it in 2, we kind of spend double the amount of time closer. So it's not double the amount. You know what I mean? We're just spending more time at Kerbin periapsis. With the power of video editing, we can speed through that. I sped that up very, very fast in the editing software. And there we are, we have a Jool encounter. Now, it's not an ideal Jool encounter. Our periapsis is miles and miles away from the planet, but we'll do a mid-course correction burn to set that right. Now, just in case I extended the science units for no reason whatsoever other than the fact it looked cool, and we've deployed those gigantic solar panels, and of course, the little satellite dish that is sitting at the very front of the vessel that kind of serves, it's the science bomb's means of transmitting data from the interior of Jool back to Kerbin. That communications dish is very, very powerful. It can easily reach Kerbin without the need for a relay. So the first time I did this mission, I haven't actually watched it. I skimmed through it, just kind of refresh myself of how the craft looked, things like that. And I noted that I had big relay dishes on the Jool Diver, so that the bomb, the science bomb, could just have a small antenna that just bounced a relay signal to the Jool Diver that then forwarded that to the Kerbal Space Center. This time, the Jool bomb, the science bomb, can just transmit everything itself. Don't know if it was a better solution or not, but there were interesting complications for various aspects of this mission that I will refrain from spoiling at this stage, but just gotta, keeping that viewer retention up. Anyway, as you can see, I should probably talk about what's on screen, right, rather than just teasing what's to come. I'm currently playing around with the Maneuver Node Maker, getting a Tylo gravity assist, so that we can circularize around Jool essentially for free. I think it's 89 meter per second burn, but a lot of that is changing our planes that were actually passing close by Jool and its moons, and there's a negligible amount to just modify that part of the trajectory, or so changing the trajectory like that, and then to adjust it a little bit more so we're passing by Tylo, that's essentially 0 meters per second. And it puts us in a nice, stable Jool orbit, but not a very good one for the purposes of this mission. Or rather, an ideal one for the purposes of this mission, but not a very good one if, say, I was planning on filming this mission and then turning that into a video and then posting it on the internet, which sadly, that's what I was planning on doing, and hopefully have done if you're hearing my voice and seeing this on your screens right now. The reason for this is our augment of periapsis around Jool is all wrong. Our periapsis is on the dark side of the gas giant, so that when we enter its atmosphere, it's going to be pitch black. We won't be able to see anything, which would be fine for the purposes of the mission, because we'll still get the same amount of science. It will still be kind of the same effect as like, oh, we're exploring Jool, and the headcanon aspect of this. There will be cameras and imaging programs and equipment that can. It doesn't matter that we're on the dark side of the planet, but it'd be quite nice to, I started this video by saying that there's a new update to BlackRack's Volumetric Clouds mod, so it'd be quite nice if we could actually, see BlackRack's Volumetric Clouds in action on Jool, and let me just say, it's terrifying, but we'll cross our bridges as we get there. But if we're passing on the dark, see what I mean? Our periapsis is on the dark, so if we do a retrograde burn at apoapsis, we're gonna, the entirety of our flight through Jool is gonna be in pitch black. So I was like, oh no, I've got to do something about this. So I quickly set Lathe as my target, because basically modifying my orbit by basically burning prograde at apoapsis, raising our periapsis to be, apoapsis height, and then swinging around, and then burning retrograde. That's going to be a hugely expensive burn. I think it worked out to about 2 kilometers per second of delta V, which I have the budget for, but then I wouldn't have been left with very much fuel remaining to kind of get back home. So I decided to do a little gravity assist at Lathe. By the way, if we just look at Lathe, Jool of the system, as in like a necklace type of jewel, right? I realized that sounds phonetically the same as, the gas giant in the middle of the system. This is great commentary. The Jool of the system, Lathe, beautiful blue. I don't know what I'm saying, guys. I've been out of the game for a while when it comes to making Kerbal Space Program content, right? The last video I did was December 2024. It was like, I have not done a KSP video all year, alright? So I'm just taking some time to get myself used to it. Anyway, now I've forgotten what I was even talking about. But yeah, can we call Lathe the Jool of the Kerbal system? Obviously, in real life, the Jool of our system is Saturn. But, Jool, so the gas, so JOOL, it's just like a bogey, innit? It's not really like a jewel, is it? I guess it's emerald color? I don't know. It's not as pretty as Saturn, though. But Lathe, mwah, especially with those atmospheric mods, I think we should be calling Lathe the crown jewel of the Kerbal system. If not, actually, maybe Eve. Actually, no, I'd like to backtrack. I think Eve would be a better jewel. Sorry, Lathe, friendship ended. But we'll be passing Lathe one more time, and then we'll just move on from me ever mentioning this topic at all in the video. So as you can see, through a series of gravity assists, I've kind of swung my augment. I've basically managed to get it so our periapsis is on the light side of Jool. We then have to do a prohibitively expensive burn, 860 meters per second, at our new Jool periapsis to raise our apoapsis to a nice high height. The reason why we need a really high apoapsis is because when we enter Jool's atmosphere, I would rather like to be able to leave it again and not just re-enter and then everyone perishes. And if we've got a really low apoapsis, then there's a risk that the effects of aerobraking through the atmosphere is going to slow us down and put us on a suborbital trajectory, basically. So we want to be coming in nice and high so that the effects of the aerobrake don't decelerate us too much and, have it so our Kerbals can never return back to Kerbin. However, we've just deployed the science bomb, which of course will not be returning back to Kerbin. I want this to descend really, really deep into the atmosphere of Jool and give us a good glimpse at those beautiful volumetric clouds and weather effects that are happening down beneath the unassuming surface of Jool. And here we are about to enter the atmosphere. So I'm just using up the remaining liquid fuel in our fuel tank, just try and decelerate as much as possible because, as you can see, we have very, very extreme re-entry heating when we hit Jool's atmosphere. Now, you're currently watching take 2 of me attempting to send the science bomb into Jool. The first time I tried it, I detached the engine stage and then just used our ablative heat shield. But the Science Junior kept on overheating, and then I would run out of ablator, and it just wasn't working. I was like, oh my gosh, I should have tested this before filming it. But also, I'm going to have to scrap this part of the video and mission. It's going to be really embarrassing. But I thought I'm going to reload a quick save and just try one more time, but leave the engine, fuel tank, and crucially, the metal adapter piece that connects the engine stage to the decoupler and heat shield above. My theory was that the engine stage would not survive the heating of re-entry, but would survive long enough that by the time it had been destroyed, or ablated, if you will, we'd have bled enough speed and heat that the heat shield could then take over and survive the rest of re-entry. Or entry, now I think about it. We're not re-entering Jool. But yeah, anyway, as it turns out, as you probably just saw, the engine stage made for a better heat shield than the heat shield piece itself. I guess the spark engine has really good heat resistance, and I suspect the adapter plate, it being just a big dumb piece of metal, probably has good heat tolerance as well. I mean, that's part of the reason why SpaceX are building the Starship out of stainless steel, right? But yeah, odd. And no bamboozle was done here, no part files were edited or heating settings tweaked. I guess I was just surprised. Now, this part of the descent was pretty boring. There's nothing going on. So I'm just going to do a quick crossfade to a little bit later on when we entered, I guess, a cavity between 2 layers of clouds. Oh, isn't that just the most terrifying thing you've ever seen? Ooh, wow. I mean, this was totally worth it. I'm so glad that the science bomb worked because, well, we don't get this kind of view. Oh my goodness, there's a lightning storm, everyone. We only got this sort of view from the Jool Diver. We're far too deep to meaningfully return at this stage. I mean, I say that, I'm totally being cowardly. It is possible to build a rocket that descends into Jool and then takes off again, especially with propellers, but that's not what I wanted from this mission. We're doing a different mission statement, maybe in the future. Ooh, that one was rather close, wasn't it? I'm very surprised our parachutes have not been sizzled yet, but yes, maybe in the future we could do some sort of I don't know, like a rocket that goes down to the surface, I'm doing air quotes, of Jool and then flies back up, or maybe just do like a Kraken Drive SSTO. I've done a Kraken Drive SSTO before that went to even back, so maybe I could do that again on Jool. That's just easier then, isn't it? So yeah. Now, this is kind of where things went a bit wrong. So I wanted to, I did all the science experiments. I've extended the antenna. Let's transmit the science back. But we ran out of electric charge because I thought I had partial transmission enabled. I guess you have to click require complete to enable partial transmission. But I had to recharge the batteries and the RTG was taking ages. So I tried just increasing my physics time warp a little bit just to speed the process up and get our batteries recharged so we can actually just go ahead and transmit that science back. And then, in my hubris, the science bomb exploded. Maybe that's my fault for calling it the science bomb, not sure. So we couldn't get that data back. I mean, we all saw it. That's evidence enough. So that I feel satisfied that we've gathered scientific data. So we're just gonna go ahead and leave it. But that was kind of the fun. Well, a very fun part of the mission. Well, it's not the most fun part of the mission, right? The most fun part was flying this thing through Jool. So now we're going to go ahead and do that. Now, you might have noticed that those 4 kind of surrounding fuel tanks at the front that are attached to the, I guess, the core, they're empty. So we don't actually need them at this stage. But I've left them attached because there are some really far forward fuel tanks on those, like on that cluster of 4 tanks around the core. So we can pump the fuel that's kind of in the core into those forward tanks to kind of help shift our center of mass as far forward as possible to ensure stability. We do have those tail fins that are kind of at the back of the vessel, but they would probably get destroyed extremely quickly in the heating effects of Jool entry, and so I kind of didn't want to have to rely on them to keep things under control. We do have quite a few SAS wheels as well to help control, but ultimately we need physics, to keep things balanced. So having all of the fuel, well, as much fuel as possible, as far forward as possible, keeping the center of mass as close to our big inflatable heat shield, that should help ensure that things remain stable. And we're going to prepare for Jool entry. So we're going to retract those little science arms, inflate the forward heat shield, and of course retract the solar panels, not before transferring our Kerbals to various kind of places on the vessel to give us some nice interior views of the event, I guess. I kind of missed an opportunity to use free IVA. I just totally forgot this mod existed. Sorry about that. But yeah, now we're going to get ready to begin our dive into Jool. Oh yes, we need to retract the communications dish as well at some point, but I guess not right now. Right now, we're descending down for the final plunge, and yeah, I don't know what else to say. I might just say the reason I have those kind of Science Juniors and I guess all the rest of the equipment on those arms. I mentioned this during the build time lapse, but just to kind of recap, we're going to run those experiments, but they're kind of on the sheltered side of things. They're behind the forward heat shield, the lee side of it. And so I felt like it would be cooler if we could actually extend them beyond that kind of safety region and expose them directly to the onslaught of Julian atmosphere and, get raw data that way. So that's kind of why I did that. Obviously, completely meaningless. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever in terms of the actual science points you get in the game. But from kind of a gameplay perspective, it's pretty fun, right? That's why I play video games, isn't it? So there you go. I did it because it's fun. And who are you to stop me? Please like and subscribe to the video, by the way. Now, atmospheric entry is imminent, so I must now leave you guys and take on my role as mission commander to instruct the Kerbals and guide them through this very dangerous flight. Okay, Jebediah, Bill, and Bob, you have now breached the atmospheric border. First we're going to do is extend the science units and run the experiments. We're going to retract those arms. We have successfully gathered the data. Bill, why did you just re-extend them? They're going to overheat. Thank you very much for retracting them. They're going to stay retracted now. We've gathered the scientific data that we needed thus far, but we need to conduct a crew report. Does anyone want to volunteer to do that? Very good. Thank you, Bob. Very, very good. So yes, we've now gathered all of the science that's currently in the external science container. I'm going to need you, Jebediah, after we've left the atmosphere to go ahead and gather that. And yeah, just monitoring all the systems. All systems look good thus far. And I must say the view is great as well. I can see you guys. We've got like a drone following you at the moment, just so I can see the temperature gauges. Can't do that any other way. There has to be a drone following you so I can see a third-person view. And also, as you guys know, I film all of your missions and I put them on my YouTube channel. That's basically what funds this entire aerospace company, to be honest. So don't object to that, please. Okay. Oh, and just a quick flight plan update. We have now passed periapsis and are now once again ascending, so you should be well and truly clear, and you will make it out of Jool's atmosphere and return home to your families in another 9 years. So I hope you all are happy about that. Now, this is the awkward part where I need Jebediah. There's one other science experiment we've not done yet, and that is an EVA report. So now that things are cooling down, Jebediah, I'm going to need you to exit the vehicle now and go. Jebediah, get back inside! You were getting. Oh, the drone was picking up a temperature gauge. Okay, try again. Oh, you were too slow. Well, it looks like someone's losing kebab privileges when you get back to Kerbin, Jebediah. Very disappointed in that performance. But thank you for gathering the science from the Science Containment Unit. Good show, chaps. Good show all round. Bravo. I'm now going to leave you. See you later. So I think I've done my part in, keeping crew morale high by just sort of checking in with them during that really, really dangerous phase of the mission. And with that, we can actually just get rid of those peripheral tanks now because we no longer need that kind of extra kind of ballast power that they have. Transferring the fuel out of them, of course, before we detach. And there we are. They're going to just, eventually they'll just swing back around and then re-enter. I can say re-enter Jool's atmosphere now. Re-enter Jool's atmosphere and ultimately be destroyed. Thus, not leaving space full of clutter. I do believe there's one piece of space debris I've kind of left in this mission. That was the stack separator that the little science bomb was attached to the ship with. But, you know, it's the Jool system, so eventually that will just either smash into one of the moons, or Lathe or Tylo or both or Val will end up swinging it out of the system and out of the solar system. So it's not like a really, really big deal. So yeah, that's great. Don't call me out on that. So now we just need to get home. As you can see, we have a huge amount of Delta V. Actually, I've massively over-engineered this ship. I mean, in my defense, a lot of the fuel was not there for the purposes of, you know, firing the engine. It was there to act as ballast at the very front of the vessel to keep the center of mass as far forward as possible. So I'm not going to accept any accusations of not being very good at designing vehicles in Kerbal Space Program, because that was kind of the primary purpose of the fuel. Well, I guess it was the secondary purpose of the primary purpose obviously was to feed the engines, but it also was a very significant purpose, acting as ballast. So let's call it the 1.5 purpose. What's in between primary and secondary? Like primary. It was the primary purpose of the fuel was to act as a balance point. How do I have over 500 million subscribers? It was really beyond belief at this point, isn't it? But yeah, anyway, steering things back on track because I couldn't be bothered to like time warp until we had a proper Jool to Kerbin transfer window. I just basically ejected myself from the Jool system and put us on an orbit that passed by Kerbin, like our periapsis kind of intersected Kerbin's orbit, and then we can make a cheeky maneuver node just after periapsis to basically force a Kerbin encounter. So it's a relatively cheap burn in the grand scheme of things, just over 100 meters per second of Delta V, which I think we can afford, having over 1,000 meters per second of Delta V remaining according to the in-game readouts. And yeah, that's our Kerbin encounter. So I would say, the mission is wrapping up. We've done the hard part. It's going to be a simple case of re-entering a Kerbin's atmosphere and landing and calling things a day. But of course, it is not going to be that simple. Do you guys remember the ancient times of about 25 minutes ago when I said I forgot to add a heat shield to the crew module and indeed a decoupler that would allow the crew module to, you know, detach from the rest of the station? So yeah, it's going to be interesting. And as I don't want to really drag up the memory of that whole weird ramble about the fuel tank serving as a balance point, but of course we detached those 4 surrounding fuel tanks from the front. Lord knows why. I should have definitely left them attached, but you know, you live and learn, don't you? So our center of mass isn't as far forwards as it was when we were entering Jool's atmosphere, so things were very tense. There's Kerbin ahead. I decided to start setting things up for our deadly re-entry. So first thing I'm doing is just adjusting our periapsis height. I went for 40 kilometers. Not really sure why, just seemed like a good number to go for. And then we can just I just arranged all of our staging so that basically in the event of catastrophic explosion, we can quickly detach the detach as much as we can. I did add a decoupler to the front of the command pod, just not to the back of the command pod. So we can detach ourselves from the heat shield and, you know, fuel tanks. And of course, we want to stay attached to the heat shield and fuel tanks for the re-entry itself, which is now underway. It's going really, really well at the moment. As you can see, I you know, at the time I was like, oh yes, I'm a genius. It's working. And then it stopped working. It's not working. It's no longer working. But then, you couldn't make it up. It was perfect. Everything just separated from the command pod. I was like, I could not have planned. I could have done this mission 100 times. It would never have gone that well. But yeah, and this, this isn't even like a quick load version. Like, this was just my first attempt at re-entry. So I was pretty happy with that. Sadly, we're not out of the woods yet. A further disaster awaits, I'm afraid. And it was so stupid. It was so stupid. But, you know, it adds a bit of excitement to the video, I suppose. Here we are, re-entering at a much slower speed this time. So at this stage, I wasn't worried whatsoever. I probably could have just detached the capsule from the fuel tanks and heat shield, and just, it probably would have been able to withstand the heat of re-entry at this speed. But I thought, I'll play it safe. I'll play it safe and leave things attached. And then, you know, the heat of re-entry passed. So I set up my staging and detached the capsule and smashed into the heat shield and destroyed the parachute. Okay, guys, just bear with me. I've got to just quickly give the team some advice. Oh, whoops! Yeah, you guys are gonna have to just jump out and use your personal parachutes because it was Bill's fault. Jebel Dyer, just take the experiments. Thank you for that. Bill and Bob, are you gonna jump out? Yes, Bob, get clear. Good. Now just Bill, get out. Bill, get. Oh my goodness, Bill, you do. Ooh, I love you, but that was pretty scary. All right, everyone. Well, jobs are good, and I'll just leave you guys to just parachute down. You're gonna have to land. Oh, it looks like your capsule survived, everyone. The drone is following Bill at the moment, and so everyone go land next to Bill, if you can see him. He might be quite far away from you because you're jumped out at different altitudes rather than all at the same time for some reason, which would have made a lot more sense, guys. Come on, think it through. So just aim for the capsule that survived. None of this was necessary. You're all idiots. So you can get in the caption. Just think about your actions. All right? Okay. Thank you. So after, another great morale boost from me as mission commander, we can get Jeb Kerman down to the capsule. And then just with Bob Kerman, I couldn't really see it. So I'm like, I'm just going to have to just dump him somewhere and then recover him separately. But then, I spied a very small dot in the distance and identified it as the capsule. So we can kind of nurse Bob over there very, very slowly. And then we ended up splashing into the water. And because of the scatterer waves, swim speed was greatly reduced. So what I'm going to do is just do a little crossfade, and Bob is now arrived, bobbing his way over to the survived. How did the capsule survive? Was it because I wasn't directly controlling it? Because I feel like it wouldn't have survived if it had just smashed into the ocean with me still controlling it. Is that a thing? Like if you're not controlling a vessel, kind of weird things happen to the physics and the way things get damaged? I don't know. Now it's Bill Kerman's time to get onto the capsule. As you can see, he wasn't very graceful in embarking it, so he couldn't really grab onto the ladder. I tried removing his helmet and neck ring, but that didn't really improve things. Basically, I was just spamming the F key and trying to get him to grab the ladder, to very little avail, but eventually he got the message, and there we are, we're now on the ladder, and I've boarded the capsule. Now it's just Jeb Kerman's time, and he's kind of the most important one because he's got all the science data with him. I was not anticipating the capsule to survive, so I got him to take the data from the capsule, but yeah, all fine in the end. So we can recover the vessel. Now, in terms of science, guys, I'm not gonna we earned 955 science. It wasn't very much. I could have earned a lot more by running the experiments, well, I guess more in more places, but this was all about fun, this mission. Okay, it was just a fun old time. It was a silly mission. I just wanted to look at the clouds of Jool, and to that end, I hope it was a success, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, maybe consider signing up to my Patreon or my YouTube channel membership program like the wonderful people on the right did. If your name is there, you have sincerest gratitude from me. But yeah, thank you so much, guys, for watching this very long video. Check out Opera in the description or pinned comment. It's a great browser. And yeah, I will see you in the next video, which I guess will be spaced this week, but we'll talk about Starship Flight 7 and New Glenn 1. Wow, they blowed up the bush.